Hello, welcome to Deadliest Disasters, where we cover some of the most devastating events that happened throughout history. On January 27, 2013, what began as a night of celebration in Santa Maria, Brazil, turned into one of the country's deadliest disasters. The Kiss nightclub fire claimed 242 lives and left over 600 people injured. Most victims were young university students between 18 and 23 years old. Today, we'll examine what happened that night, why so many lives were lost, and what lessons this tragedy has taught us about public safety. This is a story of the Kiss nightclub fire. Santa Maria is a vibrant university city located in Brazil's southernmost state of Rio Grande do Sul. Home to the Federal University of Santa Maria, the city has a population of about 260,000 people, with students making up a significant portion of its residents. Kiss was a popular nightclub in the downtown area, frequented primarily by university students. The single-story building spanned approximately 1,000 square meters, or about 10,700 square feet, and was officially licensed to hold a maximum of 691 people. On that fateful Saturday night, the venue was hosting an event called Aglomerados, a party organized by students from 6 different university departments. The main attraction was a local band called Gurizada Fandangueira, known for their energetic performances that often incorporated pyrotechnic effects. That January night, which would be summer in the Southern Hemisphere, hundreds of young people packed into the club for a night that was supposed to be filled with music, dancing, and celebration. At approximately 2:30 a.m., Gurizada Fandangueira took the stage. The club was well beyond capacity, with an estimated 1,000 to 1,300 people inside. The atmosphere was electric as the crowd danced and sang along. About halfway through their set, the band's performance included a pyrotechnic display. One of the band members lit what was described as a quote-unquote Sputnik, a handheld device that produces sparks for visual effect. This wasn't unusual. The band had used similar effects in previous performances. However, this time, sparks from the device reached the ceiling where they ignited the acoustic foam insulation. This foam, made of highly flammable polyurethane, was installed to improve the venue's acoustics. Initially, some in the crowd thought the fire was part of the show. The band's vocalist noticed the flames and attempted to douse them with water, but the fire spread rapidly across the ceiling. Within seconds, the burning foam began producing thick, toxic, black smoke containing cyanide and carbon monoxide. As this smoke descended, visibility plummeted and panic erupted. People began rushing toward the exits, but their options for escape were severely limited. Kiss nightclub had only 2 emergency exits, far fewer than required for a venue of its size. Worse yet, one of these exits had been locked or blocked. This left the main entrance as the primary escape route for hundreds of panicking patrons. Compounding the problem, security guards, who were initially unaware of the fire, briefly blocked people from leaving, thinking they were trying to exit without paying their bills. This critical delay cost precious seconds as smoke continued to fill the space. By 2:40 a.m., about 10 minutes after the fire began, the club was engulfed in toxic smoke. Many victims were overcome while searching for exits in the dark, smoke-filled environment. Others were trampled in the stampede. Some managed to escape through windows that were broken by those who had already made it out. First responders arrived quickly, but faced overwhelming challenges. Firefighters worked to extinguish the blaze while simultaneously trying to rescue those trapped inside. Local residents, taxi drivers, and people from nearby establishments rushed to help pull survivors from the building. By daybreak, the horrific scale of the tragedy had become clear. The local healthcare system was completely overwhelmed. Santa Maria's hospitals quickly filled beyond capacity with burn victims and people suffering from smoke inhalation. Medical teams worked tirelessly, with doctors and nurses from their days off coming in to assist. A local gymnasium was converted into a makeshift morgue where families came to identify their loved ones. The scene was one of unimaginable grief as parents, siblings, and friends searched for those who hadn't come home. Bodies were arranged in rows on the gymnasium floor, many still wearing their wristbands from the club. The process of identification was agonizing, with some families going from hospital to hospital before finally finding their loved ones among the deceased. Brazil declared 3 days of national mourning, and the tragedy made headlines worldwide. A community that had been celebrating carnival season just days before was now planning mass funerals. Within 48 hours, most of the victims had been buried in emotional ceremonies that drew thousands of mourners. The demographics of the tragedy were particularly heartbreaking. The vast majority of victims were young university students with their lives ahead of them. Of the 242 who perished, 235 died in the club itself, while 7 more died in hospitals in the following days. Medical reports revealed that about 80 to 90% of the deaths were caused by asphyxiation from the toxic smoke, rather than from burns or injuries. Polyurethane foam, which was used for the sound insulation, releases cyanide gas when burned. This is extremely lethal when inhaled. Many victims were found in bathrooms where they had mistakenly sought refuge thinking they were heading toward exits. For survivors, the physical and psychological trauma continued long after that night. Over 600 people required medical treatment, many for severe respiratory damage. Dozens needed extended hospitalization, with some developing what became known as KISS syndrome, a combination of respiratory problems and post-traumatic stress disorder. Survivor accounts paint a harrowing picture of the chaos inside. Many described the disorientation of trying to find exits in complete darkness, breathing through clothes pressed to their faces, climbing over bodies, and the desperate sounds of people calling for help. One survivor recalled, quote, "It was like being blind. I couldn't see anything. Just feel people pushing, screaming. I fell, got up, fell again. Someone pulled me toward fresh air. I later learned it was a stranger who didn't make it out," unquote. The investigation revealed a cascade of failures that contributed to the high death toll. First, the nightclub was severely overcrowded. While licensed for just 691 people, estimates suggest there was between 1,000 and 1,300 people inside, nearly double the legal capacity. Second, the building had wholly inadequate emergency exits. Brazilian regulations required 1 emergency exit for every 100 square meters, meaning KISS should have had at least 10 exit points. Instead, it had effectively 1 functioning exit, the main entrance. Third, essential safety equipment was either missing or insufficient. The club had no sprinkler system, alarms were inaudible over the music, and emergency exit signs were not illuminated or they were placed incorrectly, leading some victims deeper into the building rather than towards safety. Fourth, the acoustic foam used on the ceiling was highly flammable and improperly installed. It had not been treated with fire retardant chemicals despite being in a high-risk environment. Fifth, the pyrotechnics used by the band were inappropriate for indoor use. The type of device that started the fire was designed for outdoor performances with much higher ceilings. Finally, inspection and licensing procedures had failed catastrophically. The club's fire safety license had expired months earlier, yet it continued to operate without restrictions. Municipal oversight was relaxed, with inspections either cursory or skipped entirely. The criminal investigation moved swiftly. 4 individuals were initially arrested just 2 days after the fire: the 2 owners of the nightclub and 2 members of the band, including the vocalist who had lit the pyrotechnic device. As the investigation deepened, attention turned to municipal officials responsible for issuing permits and conducting inspections. The probe revealed a troubling pattern of regulatory failures, with evidence suggesting that proper inspections had been bypassed. In April of 2013, prosecutors filed charges against 28 people, including the club owners, band members, and various public officials. The charges included murder, manslaughter, and criminal negligence. The legal process, however, moved much more slowly than the initial investigation. The first trial didn't begin until 2021, which is 8 years after the fire. In December of 2021, the jury trial concluded with guilty verdicts for the 2 nightclub owners and 2 band members. They received sentences ranging from 18 to 22 years in prison. However, in a development that outraged victims' families, the 4 convicted men were released on appeal shortly after the verdict. Their lawyers successfully argued that they should remain free while their appeals were considered, a process that could take years in Brazil's complex legal system. This development sparked protest in Santa Maria, with families of victims accusing the justice system of favoring the defendants and delaying closure for those affected by the tragedy. The Kiss nightclub fire catalyzed significant changes to Brazil's approach to fire safety and public venues. Within days of the tragedy, inspections of nightclubs and entertainment venues were ordered across Brazil, resulting in hundreds being temporarily closed for safety violations. The federal government enacted stricter fire safety regulations, which became to be known informally as the KISS Law. These included mandatory sprinkler systems, emergency power generators, flame retardant materials, wider exits, and more visible emergency signage. Santa Maria itself passed a municipal law 5660 requiring fire brigade members to be present at large events and stricter licenses for venues hosting over 200 people. The law also mandated comprehensive evacuation plans and regular safety drills. Many Brazilian states reformed their fire inspection systems with more frequent and rigorous checks and harsher penalties for violations. Training for firefighters was enhanced with a greater focus on prevention rather than just response. The tragedy also prompted international discussions about nightclub safety. Fire safety experts compared it to similar disasters, such as the Station nightclub fire in Rhode Island that took place in 2003, and the Cromanon Republic fire in Argentina that took place in 2004, noting disturbing similarities in how preventable failures led to mass casualties. In the years following the fire, the Santa Maria community has worked to honor the victims while continuing to heal. The Association of KISS Victims' Families was formed shortly after the tragedy. This organization has been instrumental in advocating for justice, pushing for safety reforms, and creating spaces for collective remembrance. A memorial site was established near where the nightclub once stood. The KISS Memorial, So It Never Happens Again, features 242 wooden chairs, each bearing the name of a victim arranged in a semicircle around a central monument. Annual commemorations are held every January 27th, bringing together survivors, families, and community members for vigils, religious services, and awareness campaigns about fire safety. The Federal University of Santa Maria established scholarship funds in memory of students lost in the fire and developed psychological support programs for survivors and families dealing with trauma and grief. Perhaps most importantly, the community has worked to ensure that the victims are remembered not just for how they died, but for how they lived. Stories of their dreams, achievements, and personalities are shared to preserve their legacies beyond the tragedy. The Kiss nightclub fire joined a tragic list of similar disasters throughout history, including the Coconut Grove fire in Boston, Massachusetts, the Beverly Hills Supper Club fire in Kentucky, the Station nightclub fire in Rhode Island, and the Cromanon Republic fire in Buenos Aires, Argentina. These disasters, separated by decades and geography, share disturbing similarities. Overcrowded venues, insufficient exits, flammable materials, and the catastrophic use of pyrotechnics in enclosed spaces. The KISS tragedy reinforced several critical lessons. First, fire safety regulations exist for a reason. When corners are cut to save money or increase profits, the potential human cost is incalculable. Second, enforcement matters as much as regulation. Laws on paper save no lives if they're not properly implemented and enforced. Third, individual decisions in moments of crisis, like the security guards initially blocking exits, can have enormous consequences. Proper training for all staff at public venues is essential. Fourth, public awareness of fire safety needs constant reinforcement. Many survivors reported not knowing where emergency exits were located, a knowledge gap that proved fatal for some. Finally, systematic accountability is necessary. The KISS fire resulted not from a single failure, but from a chain of failures across multiple systems, from club management to municipal oversight to emergency response planning. The KISS nightclub fire represents one of Brazil's most painful modern tragedies. The 242 lives lost, most of them young people with promising futures, left an irreparable void in countless families and communities. Yet from this immense loss has come a renewed commitment to public safety. The reforms enacted in its wake have undoubtedly saved lives, though families of victims often note that these changes came at an unbearable cost. As we remember this tragedy, we honor the victims not only through memorials but through vigilance, by refusing to accept poor safety standards, by knowing where exits are located when we enter public spaces, and by understanding that seemingly small regulatory details can have life or death consequences. The story of the Kiss nightclub fire is ultimately one of preventable loss, delayed justice, and hard-won reforms. It stands as a stark reminder that public safety requires constant attention and that behind every regulation is a potential to save human lives. Thanks for watching today's video on this devastating but important historical event. If you found this informative, please hit that like button and subscribe for more historical deep dives. And let me know in the comments what other overlooked historical events you'd like to learn about. Until next time, this has been Deadliest Disasters.